Well, good evening, everyone. I'm glad you have all decided to be here with us. We're going to start a new series here in the Sunday nights called Heroes of Long Ago. You know, we have a lot of new Christians. We've been baptizing people right and left here recently, and because of that, I know we have some new Christians who do not know the stories of the Bible and don't understand how God has given us through dialogues, through narratives, through examples, the ability for us to be able to know exactly what He wants and what He expects from us. Being a loving God, He's been very careful about that and made sure you could know. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about Cain and Abel. Now more is written about Cain than is written about Abel. And most people talk about Cain, and we are too tonight, but the reason is because Abel was good and did what he's supposed to do. So there's really not a whole batch of news to be able to discuss about Cain. So let's take, Abel. Look at this, but you notice how we always say Cain and Abel. It's kind of interesting. Um, but the problem is they had a difference of attitude towards God. When uh, when we first meet with them in chapter 6, let's see, wait a minute, that's chapter 4 and verse 11. Let's read that verse 1. Let's read that down through there so we can get a grasp on what's happening. Adam lay with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, with the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of the time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord took favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out in the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know. He replied, am I my brother's keeper? The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you're under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth and received your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield crops for you. You'll be a restless wanderer on the earth. All right, now, this is what God's recorded for us to see. Now, here we got Adam and Eve, and they have these two children recorded. They had many more, but they had these two recorded for us to be able to see the level in which sin had come. And both were told to sacrifice to God, and both did. Both brought a sacrifice. Now, from the beginning of time, God has declared that sacrifices for sin were to be certain things. And we know when we look throughout the Old Testament, there was grain offerings. There were all different kinds of little animals that were offered, and sheep as well. However, while we do not know what God requested about Cain and Abel, we do know that Abel was the one who did what was right before God, and that Cain did not. And so the attitude towards God is interesting because they were both told to bring a sacrifice, and God does not give you a command without making sure you know what you're supposed to do. But when Cain brought what he wanted instead of what God commanded, then he was considering himself smarter than God. This is the same thing that Eve did. When Eve looked at the fruit and she went, that looks interesting. And she had heard what the Satan had said and she acted upon it. She had to realize that she had to discount the truth as truth and accept the lie as truth, considering that she was smart enough to know and smarter than God because he said do this and she felt like she could do that. Now this is very interesting because when we look at ourselves and we start to do things, we have to make sure our attitude is toward God. We have to make sure that when we go to sacrifice ourselves, that the sacrifice is correct before God. And when God accepts Abel's sacrifice and did not accept Cain's sacrifice, it made him different. In fact, Abel was choosing to follow God, whereas Cain was choosing not to follow God. Now look at the process here of what's going on. They were commanded to sacrifice. He decided to sacrifice. However, he decided that he was smart enough to determine what he was going to sacrifice. And when he did that, he was choosing not to follow God. Now, there's only one other person to follow. All you have is God or Satan, and your body is going to act exactly as your mind determines. And if you decide to follow God, then your body is going to do godly things. If you decide to follow Satan, then your body is going to do Satan-like things. It's just simply that plain. So when Abel chose to follow God, Abel's sacrifice was accepted. When Cain chose not to follow God, God could not accept his sacrifice. In reality, when he had chosen not to follow God, he was choosing to sacrifice his fruit and grain, wherever he brought, to Satan instead of God. In effect, worshiping Satan. Now let's take a look. Not only do they have different attitudes toward God, Cain and Abel had different attitudes toward man. Because when you follow a lie and Satan or the world, however you want to figure it, then what happens is it colors every single part of your life. You can't just follow somewhat for God and somewhat for the world because one of them's going to take over. And so when he has a different attitude towards God, it's no surprise that he has a different attitude towards man. So what happened? He got mad, did he not? It says here he got angry when his sacrifice was not in favor of God. And he says, why do you get angry, God says to him? Why are you downcast? Okay, look at what he's saying. You've chosen to be angry and downcast because it's all about you. You did not turn to me. You remember this morning we talked about most of the peacemakers who actually ignore themselves and train themselves to do as God commands. And so here we see anger is self-driven. When he is absorbed with himself, he gets angry. Why? Because he thinks, well, how dare somebody do that to me? Like when somebody cuts you off on the road, you're driving down the road and somebody cuts in front of you and then stops or slows down. The reason you get angry is because how dare somebody do that to me? Well, not right now, but under normal conditions, when you're in the store and somebody cuts in line there, you say to yourself, hey, what are you doing? You stepped in front of me. like the guy in the movie, hey, I'm walking here. In other words, I am important too. Self-driven. And notice that anger then consumes. It sits there and dwells on you and dwells on you and boils in your head until you do something about it. It consumes you. And then anger leads to lawless behavior. What do you mean by lawless behavior? Anyone who does not follow the laws of God is following lawless behavior. Well, what is that? What happened? Well, Cain then went and killed Abel. Now, look at the progression from Adam and Eve sinning and following a lie instead of the truth. And they ate of this fruit. But now this is passed down to their kids, the fact that sin's in the world, one chooses not to follow it, and the other one does, and it consumes him so much that he kills his brother. The first recorded murder. And God has shown us this because no man has a right to take another man's life except where God has specifically allowed. For example, self-defense or capital punishment or something like that. And so God has been very careful to make sure they understood they didn't make that other person. He did, and he alone has the right to terminate their life on earth. This is why a baby is as important as an adult, because all of them are human and all of them are life given by God. Now notice how the anger or this attitude of following Satan will grow and deepen as you stay in it, and will absolutely conquer your life and drag you down into it. But it takes hard work to be able and to do what is right before God. And the reason why Cain killed Abel was because he was standing there a judgment on all that Cain had done. And it just frustrated him so much. It got him madder and madder and madder. Good requires energy and hard work, just like a light. I got my electric bill yesterday. Okay, just like that, I got to pay that electric bill. I can sit in darkness for free. And you know what? When the sun goes down, it gets even darker. So now let's take a look at part C. Not only were they different in their attitude towards God and different with their attitude towards man, they have different results eternally. So let's take a look. You can't hide from God. In fact, Psalms 139 tells us, let me get over there. Psalm 139 verse 7 tells us, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths of you're there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, I sail on the far side of the sea. Even there, your hand will guide me. So you just can't get away from God. He is everywhere. And in this case, God comes and says, hey, Cain, what have you done? Where's your brother? And Cain tries to slough it off. But God's saying, don't you understand? Each person is responsible for their actions. I told your father about this, Adam. He said, I told him that if you do this, this will be the consequence. And if you don't do this, this will be the consequence. And you know this. You're personally responsible, and I'm going to make you responsible because all will stand before the king. Some will wish they had never been born because of the fact that they did not listen, and others will be escorted in by Jesus because they are covered in his blood. We're personally responsible before the king for what we have done. And it's only fair, since we're the ones that decide who we are and what we're going to do, and God gives us this life to live and even allows us to come to him and have our sins removed. No surprise that the fair way to do it is we're responsible for our own actions. Did you know our courts are based on that? You're responsible for your own actions. That's why you remember the rulings handed down like to the Menendez brothers, or this guy here recently who was so wealthy they said, well, he had affluenza disease, where he's just too affluent, and or people said, well, his parents were, were not good parents, and so he can go out and kill anybody and get away with it. How can this be? We demand justice, and we demand justice because we too are responsible. And because we're responsible, we demand them to be responsible as well. And notice that because of this, when Abel dies, he's in heaven or in the light, bound in the light or in God's way. And Cain, here is wandering the desert. The earth, because why? He said Cain's blood, Abel's blood is crying out from the ground. Over in Chennai, India, I was over there and I was at the airport, and Dr. Ubert and some others who were there, and I was talking with, they were from Church Christ there, and very kind people. They take me to the airport. I'd had my knees replaced. And they said, you see that mountain up there? I said, yeah. He said, that is where Thomas had died. In fact, we got a shrine there. There's a church here named the Church of Thomas or something like that. And when you go up there, they have taken and put glass out on this ground, and that ground is where Thomas's blood soaked in. And you think, wow, that's pretty great. And the reason why Thomas was killed because he was preaching that everyone's the same in the church, and those people who don't like that because of the fact that there are Brahmas and there are different castes, and the Brahmas had chased him and killed him. Look how simple that is. And here's what's going on. If you sin, if you're in lawless behavior, you can't be with God. If you're in lawful behavior, you're with God. So here's Abel with God, and Cain without God. In this case, walking the earth, unable to rest, unable to grow anything like he loved to grow. I know people, when I talked to Buck Goss, and he was saying, man, I love to fish. Boy, I love fishing more than anything else. And here he would be, if he were Cain, wandering the earth and incapable of fishing. Even if he threw his line out there, he wouldn't be able to fish. Or if he caught a fish, he wouldn't be able to eat it. And it's really interesting in Jude, the book of Jude only has one chapter, but in Jude and the verses 8 through 11, let me read that to you. In the very same way these dreamers pollute their own bodies, reject authority, and slander celestial beings. Even the archangel Michael, when he was disputed with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare to bring a slanderous accusation against him, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." Yet these men speak abusively against whatever they do not understand by instinct, like unreasoning animals. They are the very things that destroy them. Woe to them. Now here it is. They have taken the way of Cain. Now God said that back in Genesis 4 at the beginning. And here it is all the way in the end of the Bible in Jude, the way of Cain. What does it mean? A lawless way that's not right before God. Isn't this something? And he tells us in James 1, 13 through 15, how sin, when you have this evil thoughts, evil meaning of Satan, and you want to do something that's against God, and you hold on to it, it grows like a pregnancy until you give birth to sin. And then when you do, you're an enemy of God, and you're wandering the earth without him. How interesting God has put this for us. Let's take a look at it. From the beginning of time, Adam and Eve were there. They sinned. And by eating the fruit, they understood evil. They knew of it before, but they fully understood it now because they actually knew it. In the term, like a husband and wife now, once they're married, know each other. They're intimate with each other. Adam and Eve were intimate with evil. And so their children understood this. And one chose to follow God and one chose to follow Satan. And look at the results. One kills, the one with Satan kills the one with God. Why? Because that's all Satan can do. He's a murderer from the beginning, the Bible says. He is the kind that destroys. What about God? He's the one who builds. And Satan's the one who destroys. Satan's the one who hates. And God's the one who loves. And we see this, how your attitude and your actions and your feelings all have to be controlled so that they are for God and against Satan. Otherwise, you'll be consumed